Alright, we're back in the Ford Transit Connect. Got a brand new Denso oxygen sensor to install. So let's do that, take it for a test drive. And the owner okayed all of the other recommended repairs. We need to install some OEM parts in this thing before going too far with the diagnosis. Alright, so Denso replacement sensor. And if you look close, these things look identical down to the markings on the connector. I was actually looking, trying to find a tag, and look, it says Ford. You see that? So the new Denso sensor is an OEM Ford sensor. That's amazing. Maybe it's so specific that Denso's like, hey, we'll just rebox an OEM part. That's a win for us. Let's plug it in and take this thing for a test drive. We got the new sensor installed, but I dropped my oxygen sensor socket into the abyss. So, Borescope to the rescue. I found the socket, extracted it, jacked up the van, and now's a good opportunity to, we already got the shield off. Let's just do a visual inspection of this turbocharger. It lives back here. I can't imagine this is a fun job replacing this thing while the engine's installed. That'd be close to impossible. But what's the layout? So the fresh air comes in through the big pipe up there, and then this goes to our intercooler. Now this right here, 2-wire connector, is the boost control solenoid that the second shop put on. This is the Dorman unit. It controls the wastegate. That's this cylinder right here. There's a rod, and that that just pulls the wastegate closed and open. This is a pulse width modulated control. It's not just on and off. It's pulse width modulated. So that right there is reason enough for me to replace this part with an OEM part. If you look up the prices, this thing is almost close to $300. This little solenoid with 3 hoses. It's really ridiculous. But the Dorman one's like 50 bucks. So you tell me why the OEM costs 6 times more than this aftermarket replacement. Maybe because the OEM actually works. Now, we'll take a closer look at the history of the vehicle, what the dealer said, then what the other shop did. Why did they replace this thing? It might have been a good guess, but if they installed a bad part, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Maybe it causes similar issues. So there it is, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let's take this thing for a test drive with the new oxygen sensor. Alright, so let's clear the trouble codes. Yes. Vault memory completed. And we'll take a look at some OBD2 data while we drive. Alright, we're in closed loop. Our oxygen sensor, or air-fuel ratio sensor current, is right around 0 milliamps like it should be. Equivalence ratio is nice and tight at 1. It's not oscillating or fluctuating. Short term is 2 to 3% instead of minus 20 to plus 10. This is looking pretty good. Let's take it on a test drive. Alright, let's accelerate here, see if it still surges. I'm sure it'll still surge. Yep, still got the surge. It definitely drives a lot better because, hey, we're in fuel control. Everything's spot on the money. It already drives much better. The surge isn't as noticeable. You can just hear it kind of whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So we gotta keep replacing more parts, I guess. Oh, I saw the short-term trim spike up. Fuel rail pressure is 645. I don't want to get stranded. I think we're okay. Let's scan it for codes real quick. Just 3 permanent codes. Okay, so no new codes. That's fine. Let's go back into OEM menu and just look at those turbo pressures. I want to see them fluctuate as it's surging. And I really hope that the culprit's going to be this Dorman boost pressure control solenoid. We can't really, how can you prove that? You know, I looked on some EcoBoost forums, and they say that these boost solenoids, the OEM ones, go bad, and sometimes they have to replace it multiple times. So what are the chances that a Dorman one is going to work? Not a chance. And then the 2 pressure sensors, the main map sensor and that intercooler boost pressure sensor, I want to replace those with OEM parts as well. Basically, if it has wires coming out of it and it's related to drivability, OEM only. So that's 3 parts that we need to replace. Then, if the surging goes away, you know, that problem's solved. The stalling problem, though, that we experienced when the fuel pressure dropped off the cliff, like the high pressure pump wasn't working at all, is that a failing high pressure pump. That's the 4th part that we might have to replace. So we'll just keep driving it and making it better and better, but it's already on its way. Yep, so we're still definitely seeing the surging. Whoosh, whoosh. It's like a cycle. Every second you just feel boom, boom, pull, pull, pull. I'm trying to see what's going on with our wastegate control percent. Is it opening up the wastegate too much and letting the boost off? So when it's 0%, the wastegate should be closed and ready to boost. And then basically when it reaches a certain PSI, it should be letting off the boost. This van accelerates pretty fast, so I have to keep braking a lot to slow down. You would think it would be just a constant boost instead of up and down, up and down, up and down. You can see the wastegate controller is also going up and down. So I don't know if it's a cause or effect. But we need a good wastegate controller. That's the boost solenoid. That's the Dorman part. By the way, no trouble codes during the entire test drive. Well, there's a neat bidirectional test we can try. Turbo wastegate percent, and we can set it, you know, from 10% to 90% duty cycle. So let's start with 10%, see how it drives, see if it surges, then go up to whatever, 80%. So pay attention to the manifold pressure and the boost pressure sensor at the intercooler. So no surging. Okay, so it's smooth, it's relatively peppy, but it's not building boost. So now, let's ramp up this to, let's say, 50%. See what happens. See, so the computer takes control. Okay, I see how it is. This doesn't want you to overboost it, I guess. What if we just keep it at 30%? Okay, no surging there, but again, we didn't have much boost. Let's go to 40%. And then the computer takes control over it. Huh. So you can't really do a good experiment. What if we just do a medium throttle? Computer still takes control over it. Okay. Back to the pastry delivery van. We have some OEM Ford sensors to install. So the first one, the primary map sensor. This one right here, made in Germany, 3-pin. And then there's one that lives below on the intercooler outlet to the engine. It's called a boost pressure sensor. This one's made in Mexico. It's a 4-pin. And for 2 sensors, I paid 160 bucks. That's a lot more than these cheap aftermarket ones. So we're going to install these. Now, will that fix any of the customer complaints? Not sure, but we need to start with good parts before we diagnose any problems. We need to trust our data, and that means OE sensors. So let's pop that in, and also the one on the intercooler. So obviously the one up top is a piece of cake. Okay. Just a O-ring. That's going to be this one, made in Germany. So when you compare them, I mean, obviously they look very similar, but internally I'm sure there are some differences, and we can't use that. Bingo. So that's in. One down, one to go. So we're gonna have to jack up the car for the second one. So under the van here, next to the radiator on the driver's side, you can see the connector for that boost pressure sensor right above the intercooler pipe right there. See the 4-pin? I have it unplugged, and I just wanted to see how to best get at this thing. It's completely buried, and I was looking through the mirror, and actually that looks like it hasn't been touched. It's an OEM Ford part number. So did the other shop charge the customer for a sensor that they didn't even install? I mean, it makes my job easier, but what the heck? Well, we'll just plug that back in. I'm not going to replace it if it doesn't need to be replaced. It's OEM, so I'm happy with that. We didn't have any codes for the boost pressure sensor anyways, just the map performance. So I can return that to the dealer. We didn't even open the box. And then the one I'm waiting on from eBay is the boost pressure control solenoid. That's the Dorman one. We're definitely replacing this. While we're under here, one thing I want to do is check the actual pressure actuator for the wastegate. So I have it the hose unplugged from the solenoid, and I just have a bicycle pump installed to that hose. And the instructions, the OEM service instructions say don't apply more than 15 psi to the actuator, so we're going to be careful. And let's see if the rod actually moves. So I'm going to slowly apply some pressure to that. It's probably going to be impossible to see. I can barely see myself here. The drive axle's in the way. But let's pump it up. Yes, it's moving. And it's holding very nicely. You can see that extended. You probably can't see, but the rod there extended. And that's about 10 psi. So when I unplug the hose, the rod will snap back in. Let's see if that happens. It's really hard to get lighting on there. Okay, there's the rod. I'm going to unplug the pump. Okay, there it goes. It went back in. Okay, so I'm happy with the actuator. Now we're just waiting for an OEM boost control solenoid. Back to the pastry shop for Transit Connect. Last piece of the puzzle, well, I hope, is the boost pressure control solenoid. So, here's the one I took off. Obviously, flying wings of shame, Dorman. Here's the replacement that I got. Petersburg, Germany. Now, if you get the OEM solenoid and little hose assembly from Ford, from the dealer, MSRP is $275 for that stupid little solenoid. It is outrageous. Plus tax, plus, you know, I have to mark it up a little bit. I spent time researching the part numbers, going to the dealer, getting it, whatever. Over $300 for a stupid solenoid. So I looked online, see if I could cross-reference it to not a Ford branded solenoid, but, you know, like the OEM supplier. And it came up as this Petersburg, Germany solenoid that I think used also on Volvos. So here it is. Fits Ford. You know, there's the Ford part number. There's the Petersburg part number, and everything looks legit, right? Auto724.us. Now, it came in a saran wrap and bubble wrap and a little box. So that is already a red flag for, unfortunately, Chinesium. But I want to test it. So these solenoids, how do they work? You apply a pulse width modulated signal, and it's basically from 0 to 12 volts, and it's supposed to slowly move and vary the boost pressure to the turbo actuator. So I want to see if this is a variable solenoid. So we're just going to use the power supply and turn up the voltage slowly and see if, so this is coming from the pressure side, and right now it's blocked off, can't blow through it, and this is going to the fresh air side. This is the pressurized side. So whenever this solenoid activates, it sends pressure to the actuator and lets the wastegate relieve some of the pressure. Makes sense. Classic boost solenoid setup. Now, we're going to check both of these and see if they're variable or if they're just on-off. If they're on-off, this van's going to do the same surging thing. Right? Because it's either like full boost, no boost, full boost, no boost. And the computer's like on-off, on-off. And it goes through this cycle. And if this is Chinesium, if it doesn't work, we might have to bite the bullet and buy the $300 OEM Ford solenoid. Alright, so I'm going to dial up the voltage and just blow on this and see it's in full restriction right now. and it just opened up at 5.4 volts. That sucks. It's not variable. It's just on or off. Let's try a Dorman one just to compare it. Alright, let's compare it to the Dorman. Huh. Let's see. So this thing opens at 9 volts, and I'm going to turn the voltage down now. We'll see when it closes. So this thing has to go all the way to 0 to close. Is that correct? So you can hear it click at right there, 9, all the way back down, back up. So it clicks on at 10. That's unbelievable. That's quite the hysteresis. From 10 to 0 volts, I've never seen a solenoid do that. So there's a huge difference between these two, even though we suspect this one's Chinesium. This one at least opens and closes at 5 volts. Let's listen. It's actually very quiet. So from 5 to 3 instead of from 10 to 0. Holy crap. Well, let's try it out, see if the van performs any differently. So the replacement solenoid is, I guess, semi-successfully mounted. I had to put a piece of inner tube to push it onto this metal tab because it didn't just clip on like the OEM is supposed to. Hoses are there. They're nice and tight, but I didn't put any clamps on there. So basically this is for testing purposes only. If the owner, if this works, and I suspect it will be very different from the Dorman because on the bench it tested very differently, then I'll give the owner the option of, you can take this as is, this is like 50 bucks, or you can pay the $300 for the OEM solenoid, which will work the same, but it'll just fit, you know, without any modifications. So I think that's the way we're going to go. Let's take this thing for a test drive. Alright, so we have our data pits here, RPMs, equivalence ratio, manifold absolute pressure, fuel rail pressure. This is the boost sensor that we did not replace, that was still OEM, throttle position, turbocharger bypass valve, and turbocharger wastegate. Look at the wastegate, it's at 50% steady. That's interesting. That was not the case with the Dorman. Let's drive it, see what happens. Alright, here we go. Let's do some little acceleration here. Zero surging. How about that? What a surprise. The Chinesium is better than Dorman. It's unbelievable. Alright, let's look at the data. So this thing has got some pep now. Look at a nice steady boost, 22, 25 PSI on the turbo, on the map sensor. And then our turbo boost pressure sensor, 26. About 26, it maxes out. Okay, nice and steady, no oscillations. And look, our solenoid was right around 50% duty cycle. So it's working. That's pretty crazy, but just goes to show it's become almost a habit or a reflex asking customers, do you have anything aftermarket installed? Any sensors, solenoids, whatever? If so, you might as well just go back to OEM and then we can do the diagnosis. They might save them a trip, you know? I mean, they were close, they replaced the right part, but they used the worst thing you can put on there. Something that says dormant, has wires coming out of it. 9 times out of 10 is not going to work, or not going to work right. eBay to the rescue. I mean, we didn't have to pay $300 to the dealer. Paid whatever, 50 bucks on eBay. Is it going to keep working? Oh, I'm going to keep driving, and we'll see what happens. But so far, it's running, you know, just like it should. Customer complaint addressed. Now, what about the intermittent stalling issue? Is that going to happen? If it does, we'll need to continue this case study. If it doesn't, I would have no idea how to explain that. How would you just lose fuel pressure? Could it, the computer was just so confused with 6 trouble codes that shut off the high pressure pump? I have no idea. But we'll keep driving and scan it for codes once we get back to the shop. Alright, we're back. A little bonus footage. No trouble code set during the test drive. It drove perfectly. No stumbles, no hiccups, no anything. So let's exit out of here and see if all the monitors are complete. And for customers that bring their vehicles from far away, I do want to go through all the monitors to make sure everything's on the up and up, because we don't want any comebacks. So we have only 3 completed and 5 incomplete. So we would have to take this thing on more cold start test drive. So fuel system not complete, CAT not complete, evap, O2 sensor monitor, O2 heater. So that's because I've been starting it up cold, pulling in the shop, shutting it off, so that's not a cold start cycle, and then it doesn't run the monitor. So we'll park this thing outside and take it for a good test drive in a day, make sure everything's good. That's it. I want to give a shout out to our friends at Dorman, because they make the best case studies for my channel. Thank you, Dorman. Keep it up. Only the best. So we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. So I just got off the phone with the customer. He was pretty pleased that his delivery van is driving top-notch again. And he also approved replacing the weak low-capacity battery. We'll do that soon. And then I told him, you know, you paid a lot of money to shop number 1 to install junk aftermarket parts on your van, and obviously didn't fix the problem. What was the original problem? It could have been the boost solenoid went bad, you know, the factory one, but then replacing it with a junk Dorman didn't make things any better. I'm sure it only made it worse. So I recommended to him, hey man, money is money. What are you paying for here? Try to get your money back. So I left the parts that I took off, you know, in the van, so he can go ahead and replace or try to get a refund for the map sensor, the boost solenoid, and they charged him 3 hours to install those 2 parts. It doesn't take more than like half an hour, just 2 connectors and 3 little hoses. So that's crazy that, you know, they charge them that much for inferior parts. So you can, you know, I totaled it up according to their invoices. It's almost 600 bucks that you could get back and put it towards stuff that actually needs to be done. So that's it. We'll do one final shot with all the monitors complete, no code set. Hopefully this thing won't stall out again. If it does, it'll stay here. So the owner, since he's coming from far away, he said drive it for a week, make sure it is 100% reliable, because he doesn't want to make, you know, another trip to get something else fixed. So we'll follow up on that. All right, next day in the pastry van, I installed a brand new OE size battery. The one that was in there was small and the capacity was garbage. So basically start from scratch and took it for a 10-mile loop, driving it normally. No like hard accelerations, just normally trying to pass all of the emissions monitors. Drove great, no stalling, no hiccups, no issues at all. Let's see in OBD2 how many monitors have completed. So we actually have 7 monitors completed and 1 incomplete. So let's read IM readiness. So everything's ready except for evap. Okay, that looks great. Let's read any trouble codes. So we have 1 permanent code from before, the P0106. So with the next drive cycle, that should clear out if there are no issues. So we'll let this sit here for half a day until it cools down all the way. Take it on another cold start test drive, and place your bets now. Is the stalling issue going to come back or not? I have no idea. I mean, it drives perfectly fine. If there was a problem, you would think it would be more consistent. The stalling and then the long crank, low fuel pressure problem. That's the only variable left that, after everything else has been resolved, we're still not sure about that. So we'll take on a couple more test drives and see what happens.